Hello and welcome to the CX Files. This is the first episode for 2026. I'm Mark Hillary, I'm in London, UK, and it's Thursday 22nd of January. Welcome to this new year with the CX Files. This is the 400th episode, and we're going to do something rather unusual this time because last night both Peter Ryan and myself were in London. We were in a pub near to Westminster. Lian Rowlands, a good friend of the podcast, was there as well, and she asked us questions about the pod, and we discussed the history of the pod, where it's going, why we're doing this, and took questions from the audience. The pub was packed and it was a great evening for everybody. So thank you very much to everyone who came out. And this is the live recording from the event.
Can we just have your attention for 2 minutes, please? We're going to start the recording very shortly for the 400th episode of the CX Files. First of all, I want to say thank you to everybody for coming. People have come an awful long way to be here. Some of you have come around the corner, so not so much thanks to you. It's an absolute pleasure to have you here at the Grosvenor in Pimlico. Thank you as well to the pub staff. Thanks for putting up with us and the chaos while we tried to get this set up this afternoon. Thank you for everybody's attention. It's very nice and very quiet. We're going to spend about 20-25 minutes just recording the 400th episode in front of a live audience. And without further ado, I'm just going to invite Peter and Mark just to say a couple of words and then we'll get started. So Peter, Mark.
All right. Big thanks to everybody for coming out. It's actually very humbling when you see your friends and you see some people who you've known literally all your career who've decided to spend the evening, spend your personal time with us. I just want to say a special shout out to Colette. Many of you will know Colette. Colette, wave please. Colette works with me. She's my personal assistant. And she messaged a lot of you, inviting you to come for tonight. So a big thanks. Can we have a round of applause for her? A lot of people don't know this is actually the first time Colette and I actually met in person. And she's been working with me for 3 years now. But if I can just say a big thanks to Lian for agreeing to moderate tonight, and a big thanks to Mark for having invited me to join the CX Files as a podcast co-host. A lot of people don't know the work that goes into putting a podcast together, but the editing work that Mark does on every episode takes him a great deal of time. He does a phenomenal job, and I think we can all speak to the results of each podcast, considering the number of people that listen to it and the number of people that look forward to it each week. So a big round of applause for Mark as well. And before I get teary-eyed, I'm going to pass it over to Mr. Hillary.
Thank you, Peter. Well, I started this off 8 years ago, and we're now up to the 400th episode, and when I first started this, I was alone. It was just me. I just decided, why don't I just start off a CX podcast? And after about a year, I said to Peter, because Peter was the very first ever CX Files guest. So number one, he was the first interview. And then after about a year of doing this, I said to him, why don't we share the effort here? Because, this is an interesting project, but Jesus, it's really hard to get a guest every week. Like to get somebody every single week that's interesting. So why don't we just share it across the two of us? And he agreed. And so, for 7 out of 8 years, Peter has also sort of been doing this as well. And it's been a great journey and really interesting journey. And hopefully Lian is going to ask us about it now.
So Mark has decided we're going to stand up for this. It's not my preference, but there we go. And thanks to both of them for actually answering one of the questions already. So I'm just going to scrap that off my cue cards. The reason I've got cue cards, just so everyone is aware, is that we actually had a conversation about 4 weeks ago to sort of discuss how this was going to go. And I sent these two guys over a list of some questions and some ideas, and they finally answered me at 5 o'clock tonight. So if this is chaotic, if this sounds a little bit chaotic, it's because it is, and I'm firmly passing the blame over to these two right now. So for the start...
Well, actually, before you start, maybe could you explain when we got here, and our gracious host, Rob, is in the background. Rob, so a big hand for Rob and bringing all the people on needed to get drinks fast and furious. But Lian, could you just explain, when Rob didn't know what this was about, maybe you could explain how we explained to her what the evening event was going to be? So people know what they're here for.
Christ, yeah. So we walked in this afternoon, and bear in mind this pub is lovely and warm and cosy and full now. There weren't very many people in. It was a wet afternoon. We sat here. Rav asked us, what we needed, how we wanted to set up tonight, all the questions you'd ask, and then she said, "Can you tell me what the event is about?" And I can't remember how you actually described it. Was it the communist... North Korean communist podcast for... And I've never seen a person's face fall or look quite so astonished. And I had to dive in and explain that he was only joking, because at this point we would have all been stood outside in the rain recording the 400th episode of the CX Files. So, sorry about that, Rob. We can't be blamed for his sense of humour. No. So moving on to the podcast so that everybody can go back to the bar. Let's start off with a little bit of a look back. So this is episode 400, but obviously the podcast has been going since 2018. I think we had a conversation before, so this has been going on for quite a long time. But obviously you guys go back further than that. So without wanting to sound too much like a dating show, how did you guys meet?
The first time I met Peter was at an event, a business event, a conference in Moscow.
Yeah.
And it was a very interesting event. There's so many things to say about that conference, but I think that maybe one of the most interesting things was this was the IT or Technology Association of Russia that was trying to promote technology outsourcing in Russia, and they took all of us out on a big boat on the river, one of those big flat boats that has tables on it so you can have dinner, and then as we were all enjoying dinner in the evening, some speedboats started surrounding us. And then they started boarding the boat, and they were armed. They were people with automatic weapons that jumped onto the boat and started pointing their guns at us and telling us, get down on the floor. And it was really, really scary. Yep. But then the head of the Russian Outsourcing Association stood up and said, "Haha, I guess you now understand our joke about software piracy." This entire thing was concocted as a joke.
Yeah.
So basically, this is where we first met.
Yeah, when Lian said, without wanting to sound too much like a dating show, my temptation was to say, "Well, Scylla." I remember Scylla Black from when I used to live here. But honestly, Mark and I did meet in 2006, and 20 years ago, and here we are 20 years later back in London celebrating this with some amazing friends and so forth. So it just goes to show some things do get better with age.
So you guys met in Moscow. I'll let you share with the guys at the bar later some of the other aspects of that particular origin story. But actually coming on to the CX Files itself then, what's the story behind that? Mark, you obviously started it. It was your baby to begin with. But what was its origin story? Where did it come from, and where did the idea for it come from? And then how did Peter get involved?
I've been podcasting since about 2008, so quite early, back when it used to be iTunes, and there was a reason it was podcasting, because you had to have an iPod to listen to these things. It wasn't smartphones back then, so but back then I was doing it more about IT outsourcing, so it was more to do with technology in India and places like that. but and it's funny because you can go back to some of those old shows are still there. Like you can hear Phil First, like on the launch of HFS and stuff like that. I've got stuff like that that's still on there as sort of like classic episodes from years ago. But it was more that I just decided like I'm just going to do something different. I just want to do something that connects technology to what's going on in customer experience. And talk to people, like just call people up and talk to them and do these short, originally it was supposed to be very short interviews, like sort of 10 minutes only, but I guess eventually we found that that's not long enough to get enough information. But after about a year or so of doing it just by myself, I said to Peter, like, look, do you want to do this with me? Because, it's really hard to get someone interesting every single week. So at least if we share the burden, then like getting a couple of people a month is definitely not as challenging, because one thing that we've always done is not taken sponsorship and not taken advertising. So the only people who ever get on the podcast are people that either Peter or I find interesting. It's invitation only, and I think that's interesting because so much stuff today is pay to play. Everybody is paying to be featured somewhere or promoted somewhere, and basically all we ever do is like, oh, you sound interesting, like, can I have a chat with you? So go ahead.
Look, I mean, the reality is Mark makes a very good point. We focus on thought leadership. We want people that come to the table with original ideas, cutting edge views. You don't have to be famous in our industry, but what you do need to do is have a good logical point of view that you're willing to talk about. And I think that's one of the reasons why we've been so enduring. When we were preparing this discussion, I made the point that most podcasts don't last beyond 6 to 8 months. I mean, ours has been lasting now 8 years, and without wanting to do a mutual back-patting session or anything, the reality is I think it's because we bring really quality guests on the podcast. And just out of curiosity, in the audience, how many people have been guests on the podcast already?
John wants you to ask who's been on twice.
The sequel.
Is it heckling already? Who was the best, Peter?
We'll get to that.
Don't worry, I'm getting to that. Thanks again for asking another one of my questions for later. So you talked a bit there, Peter, about thought leadership, and obviously there are a lot of people in the room who've been on the podcast. The fact that we're all in the room means we've all listened to the podcast. And obviously this is episode 400, so there is a lot of content and a lot of time has gone by and there's been a lot of change. From your perspective, what are the most unexpected things, the most accidental, unexpected things that have come out of the podcast while you've been recording? What are the most unusual and unique things?
There's been a lot of unusual things that happen, but in a good way. In my opinion, one of the most important factors is a lot of times you'll reach out to somebody who's got an interesting point of view or has made an interesting statement on LinkedIn, or you've seen them at a conference, and that one podcast interview can really generate a long-term relationship with somebody that sometimes just morph into friendships. And I would dare say I've met some of the most interesting people that I still keep in touch with and socialize with on the back of the CX Files podcast. One of the things I've always said, I worked in a few different industries prior to coming into customer experience: banking, forest products, personal computing, but it's really customer experience where I felt the most comfortable. People are nice in this industry. People want to have a chat. They want to try and get to know you. And I think that's one of the key reasons why the CX Files has been able to endure, because of the fact there's a degree of warmth there that's endemic in our space.
Yeah, and I would just add to that like what Peter said there about like just being able to meet people that maybe you didn't expect that you would be able to meet, and that's one of the things that's come out of this. I think that one of the things that you find that when you have a podcast and you say to someone, can we have a conversation that we can record for the podcast, like people are actually very open to it and very interested in doing that and being recorded because they know that it's then going to go on the record. And I think that maybe in the past, people have focused very much on listener numbers or reader numbers or click counts, you know. And what's very interesting in the last couple of years is that we've seen that all of this content is training the AI LLMs, you know. So now it doesn't matter, you know, if you have a niche podcast that's focused on something like customer experience, and you know maybe it has a few hundred or a few thousand listeners, you know, it's not rivaling NPR or the BBC. But for anybody in this industry, it's phenomenally important, you know. So if somebody is going to ChatGPT and asking a question, then they're very likely to get content that's been on this podcast, you know, as an answer. So that kind of thing has been sort of unexpected and surprising.
So again, you've just mentioned there we can't really move past to the rest of the content. Really, we can't move past. You've mentioned LLMs, you've mentioned ChatGPT. So it's a bit of a wider question then for both of you. What have been the most, over the time that you've been doing this podcast, what have been the most fundamental changes in our industry that you guys have actually seen and that you've heard come through?
Well, I'll comment first. And I think the biggest single change that I've seen is that, you know, 8, 9, 10 years ago, this industry was kind of focused on full-time equivalents, you know, FTEs. It was headcount in a contact center. You know, this is how we were paying for service. And today, everybody's talking about results. You know, it's outcome-based pricing. It's like paying for success, essentially. And I just see this as a message constantly from pretty much everybody I'm talking to in the industry. And I think that's really important because it changes everything. It changes everything that's being measured, everything that's being charged, and how the companies that provide these type of services charge for their services, you know. That's a massive change in the past decade.
It's a fundamental shift, and when Lian and I were talking with Mark about this question and just getting some thoughts out, the thing that jumps out at me is when we started doing this podcast in 2018, everybody was talking. Does everybody remember the term intelligent automation? That was a bit of a catchphrase. Well, it went from intelligent automation, then with the pandemic, sorry I said the P word, but we went to COVID-19, and then everything was all about remote working. And it was all about what you could do work from home and how to best manage work from home. And then around November 2022, everything became about AI. And it started with the Gen AI, now it's about agentic AI. And one of the things that jumps out at me is the extent to which there's been these waves of different interest in our industry. I'm not going to necessarily use the term hype cycle on all of them, but some of them have been hype cycles. And the reality is, as podcast producers, we've got to be ready to take on some of these different issues, take on some of these different topics, and as we see the shifts in the industry, look to try and find out what exactly has merit, what exactly has substance, and to debunk the things that don't.
Great answer. So I'm just going to ask everybody in the room again, just very quickly, can we just have a quick show of hands over who's actually been on the CX Files podcast? Okay, great. So I'm going to ask a question that I'm quite intrigued about, which is, of all the interviews you've ever done, so you've obviously done a lot, have you ever scrapped an interview after you've done it and gone, that was shit?
Yeah, definitely. We're not naming anybody, but definitely we have scrapped a few, and it's. I think that I mean, there's a common thread. It's either that someone has spent the entire interview just promoting their company rather than talking about the subject. Because what we always try to do is say, here is the subject we want you to talk about. And you get soft promotion for your company by doing that because you show that you're an expert in that subject. But some people seem to think that the only way that they can get promotion for their company is to mention their company in every sentence, you know, rather than just showing they're an expert. And also, you know, sometimes it's just, some people don't understand the idea that you're having a conversation. They sort of feel that it should be scripted, you know, so they'll sit there and read out a written answer or something, you know. So yeah, there's definitely a few that we've scrapped and just say we're not posting that.
Yeah, the first time that ever happened with me, I thought I'd done a pretty good interview, and I sent it through to Mark on email, and Mark messaged me, he goes, we're not using this. I was like, why? He goes, this person used the entire half hour to promote their company. I don't know, maybe I was drunk or something, but I didn't notice it. Anyway, long and the short of it, yes, you do get people. That's why all the people that have been on the podcast, you probably heard me say beforehand, it's a conversation, not an interrogation. And that's what we want. We want to have a discussion. We want it to be natural. We want it to be spontaneous. And what we don't want is, and I've had this happen too, you know, you send people the themes or the questions through before, and you start the podcast and you ask the question like, I think that the key trend is going to be really, really big in the industry. And I'm like, dude, come on, like just take the notes off, you know. And the reality is, for a quality podcast, you've got to have quality interviews. And Mark and I have a very high standard that the interviews that go out are going to be ones that people are going to learn something from. They're going to learn more. They're going to know more prior to or after that they've listened to the podcast prior to listening to it.
Cool. So we have time for one or two questions from the audience. So has anybody got a question that they would like to put to Mark and Peter? Lee, do you want to call?
So if we've got to learn something from every podcast, what's our learning today?
The learning, and it's a great question, by the way, it's adaptability and it's resilience. I mean, look, the reality is, as I mentioned before, if you're going to be successful in the podcasting game, you've got to be able to adapt to the format people want to listen to the topics that people are interested in, and you can't be afraid to change things either. I think one of the worst things anyone can do in life, it doesn't matter what it is, well, we've always done it this way, this is how we're always going to do it. And the days when podcasts first came out, and literally some of them were like an hour and a half, I mean, come on, nobody's going to listen to one of those at this point. And I think what Mark and I have been able to do over the years is we've tried different things. Does anybody here remember the old Ed Miliband podcast from a few years ago? It was a really good one, and he had the format where he and the co-host would have a little chat at the start, then they do an interview, and then they talk about the results. Mark and I tried that, and people liked it, but we just evolved to having a chat before, and then doing the interview, and then finishing up. The reality is, if you're going to think about what people can do, what they can learn from this episode, 400, it's just stick with it, be consistent, but don't be afraid to change and adapt if need be.
Yeah, and I would just add that, like Peter was just saying, like, don't be afraid to change. One of the biggest changes in podcasting that's taking place right now is that it's moving from audio to visual, and people want to watch stuff on YouTube and Netflix. But the problem is that normally when Peter and I record these things, you know, we're like unshaved and sitting there in our pajamas, you know. And I think that we've even said this a few times, you know, because we know that it's audio only, but, you know, definitely we have faces for radio, you know, so I don't know if it's going to work on Netflix, but, you know, we'll see.
I think we've got time for one more.
Yeah.
Oh, Mr. Carson.
Are there any, what's your best story about the most unusual circumstances that the two of you found yourselves in trying to run a podcast, trying to make it work?
Interesting.
Geography or
I don't know, maybe like in Minsk in Belarus, trying to
Yeah.
record intros to a podcast that we were planning to do. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe I don't know if you've got anything stranger than that, but certainly in terms of stranger situations with Peter, there's probably been a few of those. You know, definitely. You know,
And-
probably mostly involving Russia.
Yeah, well, I'm going to stick on that Belarus theme for a second. One of the strangest things that happened with Mr. Hillary and I, and there's been many, but we were in Belarus back about, I want to say 2014, and what happened was we were standing outside our hotel and we walked a few blocks down in front of the KGB headquarters, and yes, it's called the KGB headquarters in Belarus. And I'm conscious that Mr. Robel is here and he knows this place as well. And there was a big sign outside saying KGB headquarters in English, and then no photos, please. And I was on Twitter back then. Next thing I'm scrolling through my Twitter feed, and Mark's taken a picture of me standing outside the Belarus KGB. And hashtag KGB, hashtag Minsk, hashtag Peter Ryan. And we're going through exit control at the passport thing at the airport the following morning. And I am just sweating. I'm like, oh my God, I'm in big trouble here. And the woman swipes the passport and she's looking up at me, looking back, looking up at me, types some stuff in the computer. I'm like, okay, I'm dead. And then, hope you enjoyed Belarus. I was like, bye.
So just one more thing then to finish off with. So if episode 1 of the CX Files was at the bar having a drink with episode 600 in a couple of years' time, what's their conversation going to be about? What advice is episode 1 going to give episode 600, and where is episode 600 going to be?
Well, I don't know, I didn't prepare for that one, but I would guess that from 2018, like pre-pandemic, pre-AI, looking, and episode 600, you know, you're talking about maybe like 4 years from now or so, so, you know, you're looking at 2030 maybe. I would guess that the main advice or the main comment or advice would be maybe around just maintaining some sort of authentic connection to the customer. One of the things that we've certainly seen in the push towards AI and automation recently has been the idea that you're losing the ability to actually sell to people if all you ever do is like give them a pop-up, you know, or a thing to click on, rather than actually having a conversation with them. So you know, we've talked about automation kind of taking over. You know, certainly in 2023, if you read the New York Times or the Washington Post, then it was like, well, all this, everything we're talking about is finished, you know, because it's all going to be automated. But we've clearly not seen that. We've clearly seen that there's still a value in actually talking to people. And I don't see that that's going to change in 4 years, but I definitely see that we're going to see maybe a better appreciation of how you use the technology to help people interact with each other.
I think the big piece of advice I think episode 1 would give episode 600, don't be afraid to ask the hard questions. Don't be afraid to be counterintuitive. Don't be afraid to be contrarian, because the reality is you can have podcasts where everyone's going to sit and agree with each other, but that's no fun. If we're going to actually get to the nub of what the future of this industry is, we've got to be able to get out there and ask difficult questions and expect reasonable answers.
Yeah, no, I would add, I mean, that's actually a very great point, you know, because at the end of the day, a lot of people in this industry depend on things staying the same way as they always have been. And, you know, and sometimes we really do need to question the way that things are operating, because, you know, quite often things are going to be completely different 5 years from now.
Well, thanks both very much. Peter, Mark, thank you both for continuing to do the CX Files podcast. Thank you for holding us all to a high standard when either we're on it or we're listening to it or we have comments on it. Thank you for constantly keeping us thinking about it. I think everyone agrees it's been a great opportunity for us all to get together to celebrate episode 400. We'll see you again at probably episode 600. Thanks again to everybody for coming. Thanks to the guys behind the bar. I'll see you shortly.
And a big thanks to Lian for agreeing to moderate. And thanks to all of you. It's Miller time.
Thanks for listening to the CX Files podcast. We really appreciate your feedback and suggestions. You can reach myself, Mark Hillary, or Peter Ryan via LinkedIn. Please also leave a rating or review on your favourite podcast provider, as that helps more people to find us. As always, we'd like to thank Chris Haig at Traction Media for the CX Files graphics. See you next week.